In today's episode, we dive into these animals that took revenge on hunters, from a hippo's bone-crushing attack on the Congo River to a tiger stalking poachers through the murky waters of Bangladesh's mangrove swamps. But first, we begin in northeastern Namibia, where a hunter's attempt to poison a livestock-killing leopard would end with the predator coming back for him. It was September 8th, 2015, when the dry season had transformed the farmlands of northeastern Namibia into a landscape of dusty cattle trails and struggling vegetation. A leopard had been repeatedly targeting livestock across several properties in the district, killing 11 goats and 2 calves over 6 weeks. Local ranchers, frustrated by the slow permit process, pooled money to bring in Tobias Engel, a 38-year-old tracker and hunter who had built a livelihood eliminating problem predators across northern Namibia. He operated in legal gray areas, taking cash contracts and using methods wildlife authorities would never sanction. Over 5 years, he had killed multiple leopards, hyenas, and jackals. The work paid well, and Tobias had grown confident in his ability to outmatch any predator. Rather than setting up a baited blind or cage trap, methods that required patience and equipment he didn't want to invest in, Tobias opted for poison. It was cheaper, faster, and had worked for him before. He mixed a modified agricultural pesticide, illegal for wildlife applications but readily available through informal networks, into an improvised dose he estimated would be lethal within hours, though exact toxicity would depend on how much the animal consumed. He placed 3 poisoned goat carcasses along known hunting paths near the affected properties. On the third night, drag marks indicated the leopard had fed at one of the stations. Erratic tracks and patches of vomit along the trail suggested the poison had taken effect, though not lethally. Tobias followed the signs for approximately half a mile before losing the trail in rocky terrain. He assumed the animal had retreated to die, though without recovering the body, he couldn't be certain. African leopards are solitary, territorial predators, with males in this region typically weighing between 120 and 170 pounds. They are remarkably resilient, capable of surviving injuries that would kill other species, including gunshot wounds, snare injuries, and partial poisoning. When injured or weakened, they become more defensive at close range, prone to attacking when cornered or startled rather than fleeing as a healthy animal might. Their retractable claws inflict deep lacerations, while their powerful jaws can cause deep puncture wounds and serious bone damage. What Tobias didn't realize was that the leopard had survived the sublethal dose, likely having vomited shortly after feeding. The animal was physiologically compromised but still mobile. The severe drought had concentrated the leopard's activity around the farms, one of the few reliable water sources in the area. Rather than retreating into unfamiliar territory while weakened, the leopard stayed close. 3 nights later, a fresh goat kill confirmed the leopard was still alive. Tobias, frustrated that his shortcut had failed, decided to hunt the animal directly. He staked out the livestock enclosure that night, armed with a rifle and spotlight, positioning himself behind a low wall about 25 feet from the kraal. The night was warm and still, with minimal wind to limit scent dispersal toward the surrounding brush. He waited for hours. Shortly after midnight, he heard the scrape of something dragging through dirt near the enclosure. He raised the spotlight and swept the beam across the kraal. Nothing. He stood and moved forward to check the far side, stepping away from his covered position into the open. The leopard had been resting in a dense thicket, barely 15 feet to his left, the same heavy brush that bordered the kraal and regularly attracted predators to its cover. Startled at close range by the sudden movement and light, the animal's weakened state reduced its ability to retreat quickly through the dense brush. Its defensive instincts took over. It charged. Tobias heard the rush of movement and began to turn, but the leopard hit him before he could bring the rifle around. The impact drove him sideways to the ground, the rifle clattering out of reach. The leopard's claws raked across his torso, opening deep gashes from shoulder to abdomen. Tobias threw his arms up to protect his throat, but the leopard's jaws tore into his right forearm before releasing and biting down on his neck and shoulder. The deep puncture and tearing injuries, likely involving major vascular damage, caused rapid blood loss as the animal shook its head violently. The attack lasted roughly 30 seconds before the leopard released its grip and retreated into darkness. Tobias lay motionless, blood pooling rapidly beneath him. A rancher heard the commotion and found him within minutes, loading him into a truck for the drive to the nearest clinic over 40 miles away. Tobias lost consciousness during the drive as circulatory collapse set in and stopped breathing before they reached the main road. The severity of the neck and torso wounds was consistent with hemorrhagic shock, rapid, unsurvivable blood loss without immediate trauma intervention. The investigation used wound analysis, tracks, and hair samples to confirm a leopard attack. The poisoned bait stations led authorities to seize Tobias's equipment and open an investigation into illegal predator control in the district. Wildlife officials tracked the leopard with dogs 2 days later, cornering it in dense brush approximately 3 miles from the farm. Officers initially attempted to dart the animal for immobilization and testing, but were forced to shoot when it charged. Analysis confirmed sublethal pesticide ingestion, which investigators said had likely diminished the animal's ability to flee, increasing the likelihood of a defensive attack at close range. It was July 12, 2016, when the Congo River flowed broad and sluggish through the dense rainforest of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The dry season had reduced water levels slightly, exposing muddy banks where hippos hauled out during evening hours. For Etienne Mobotu, a 39-year-old commercial bushmeat hunter from Mbandaka, the hippopods represented valuable inventory for the illegal meat trade supplying restaurants across Kinshasa. Etienne had been hunting hippos for nearly 6 years, operating from a narrow wooden canoe with an outboard motor. The business supported his extended family and employed 2 assistants who handled butchering and transport. He had grown confident in his ability to judge distances and retreat times, perhaps too confident. This expedition targeted a pod of 8 hippos in a quiet tributary approximately 5 miles from the main river channel. The pod included several large adults and at least 2 calves. Their presence made the operation more dangerous, but indicated the adults would be reluctant to abandon the area. Etienne approached alone that afternoon, his assistant having remained at base camp. The canoe carried a modified rifle and enough fuel for rapid withdrawal. His plan was to target a large adult from approximately 50 feet, allowing enough distance to retreat before the pod could react. The tributary was narrow here, barely 60 feet across, with dense overhanging vegetation on both banks. The water was dark and opaque, revealing nothing of what lay beneath the surface. Hippopotamuses are among Africa's most dangerous large mammals, responsible for an estimated 500 human deaths annually. Adult bulls can weigh up to 4,000 pounds and are fiercely territorial, particularly in water. Despite their bulky appearance, hippos move with explosive speed and can outrun humans over short distances on land. Their massive jaws open to 150 degrees and deliver crushing bite force, capable of splintering bone and severing limbs. Etienne positioned his canoe approximately 60 feet from the pod, drifting upstream to minimize engine noise. The hippos were partially submerged, only their eyes and ears visible above the waterline, watching him with an unblinking stillness that should have served as warning. He identified a large bull positioned slightly away from the others and raised his rifle to take the shot. The rifle's report echoed across the water as the bullet struck the bull in the shoulder area, but the angle caused the round to deflect off the massive shoulder blade rather than penetrating the chest cavity. The bull bellowed in pain, lunging upward. The rest of the pod erupted into motion, their defensive instincts triggered by the gunshot and their companions' distress. Etienne immediately started the outboard motor, attempting to turn downstream, but the wounded bull reacted to the disturbance, the canoe now drifting between the animal and the deeper channel, and charged through the water with shocking speed, closing the distance within seconds, its massive bulk creating a bow wave that rocked the canoe violently. The hippo rammed the canoe from below, its enormous head striking the hull with enough force to flip the craft sideways. Etienne was thrown into the water, his rifle clattering beneath the surface. Before he could orient himself, the hippo's jaws clamped onto the hull, splintering the craft with a single crushing bite. Etienne surfaced, gasping directly beside the enraged bull, attempting to swim toward the nearest bank 40 feet away, but the bull was already repositioning. The massive jaws found Etienne as he tried to swim clear. The bull bit down on his torso, fracturing ribs and driving bone fragments into both lungs. The hippo tossed him sideways with a violent shake of its head, then lunged forward and bit down again. Etienne's scream was cut short as blood filled his airways. The hippo released and submerged after the second bite. Etienne floated face down, his body going into shock from the catastrophic injuries. Blood spread across the water's surface as the current carried him downstream. He gradually lost consciousness over the next 30 seconds or so, drowning before internal bleeding could complete what the crushing bites had started. The pod remained agitated for several minutes before gradually settling. Etienne's body was recovered 3 days later, snagged on submerged branches approximately 2 miles downstream. Authorities identified his bushmeat operation through evidence at his base camp, though no charges could be filed given his death. The hippo pod remained in the tributary, but the wounded bull's shoulder wound became severely infected over the following weeks. Local fishermen reported the animal behaving erratically and charging boats unprovoked. A group of hunters from Etienne's network eventually tracked and killed the bull roughly a month after the attack, butchering the carcass for the same meat trade Etienne had supplied. While the Congo River had demonstrated the explosive power of territorial territorial defense, the Kalahari's vast wilderness would soon reveal the deadly consequences of tracking a wounded predator through its own hunting ground. It was November 3rd, 2013, when the late spring heat shimmered across the scrublands of the Kalahari Desert in eastern Botswana. The dry season was ending, and wildlife had begun concentrating near scattered waterholes. For Darian Khumalo, a 45-year-old bow hunter from Johannesburg, this represented the culmination of 2 years of planning for his first African lion hunt. Darian had built his reputation pursuing dangerous game with archery equipment, considering rifle hunting unsporting. His collection included Cape buffalo and leopard taken with compound bow, and a lion would complete his dangerous game slam. He had paid $38,000 for the fully guided hunt in a private concession bordering a national park. The professional hunter was Nicholas Venter, a 52-year-old guide with 26 years of experience. Nicholas had guided over 40 lion hunts, though he privately questioned bow hunting for such dangerous game. The reduced lethality of arrows meant wounded animals were significantly more common, creating dangerous situations for everyone involved. He had expressed these concerns to Darian before the hunt, but the client had been dismissive. The hunting party had located a coalition of 3 male lions the previous afternoon, resting near a dry riverbed. Nicholas identified a mature male with a dark mane as the trophy animal. The approach was made from a ground blind near a bait site, the standard method for bow hunting dangerous game, where archery's reduced range required close proximity. Darian's first arrow struck the lion in the shoulder area, but the broadhead failed to reach vital organs. The lion bolted into dense acacia scrub, leaving a blood trail indicating a survivable wound. Nicholas insisted on a full 4-hour wait before tracking, allowing the wounded animal time to lie down and stiffen. Those hours passed slowly, the tension building as everyone understood what they would be walking into. African lions are apex predators with males weighing between 350 and 420 pounds. Wounded lions are extraordinarily dangerous, their aggression amplified by pain and defensive instincts. Unlike prey species that flee when injured, lions frequently adopt ambush positions, using dense cover to stage counterattacks against pursuers. Their powerful jaws can crush bone, and their claws inflict deep, tearing wounds. Lions have been documented circling behind tracking parties to launch attacks from unexpected angles. After the extended wait, Nicholas and Darian began following the blood trail on foot, with 2 trackers providing support. They moved slowly through dense thorn scrub, where visibility dropped to barely 20 feet. Nicholas carried a heavy caliber rifle as backup. Every few steps, the team paused to listen, for breathing, for the rustle of movement, for anything that might betray the lion's position. The blood trail led approximately 400 yards before the drops became less frequent, indicating the arrow had either fallen out or the wound was clotting. They had covered another 150 yards when the trackers located a spot where the lion had bedded down, the disturbed earth and blood indicating the animal had rested before moving on. The bed was still warm. What Nicholas couldn't know was that the wounded lion had heard the tracking party's approach and moved in a wide circle through the dense scrub. The lion's pain and defensive aggression had triggered its ambush instincts, and the animal now stalked its pursuers from barely 40 feet away, using the same cover that concealed it from its natural prey. Group had paused to reassess the trail when the lion launched its attack. The massive male burst from dense cover to Darian's left, covering the distance in 3 explosive bounds before anyone could react. Nicholas had been facing the opposite direction, his rifle pointed away from the threat. The lion's 400-pound body slammed into Darian, knocking him completely off his feet. He crashed to the ground as the lion's claws raked across his chest and shoulders, shredding through his hunting vest and opening deep gashes from collarbone to sternum. The lion's jaws closed on Darian's left shoulder and neck, fracturing his clavicle and severing major blood vessels. Nicholas spun and fired twice in rapid succession, both shots striking the lion in the ribcage and spine. The massive cat released its grip and collapsed sideways. The spinal hit paralyzed its hindquarters instantly, but the lion continued to thrash and snap with its forelegs and jaws for several more seconds before blood loss from the rifle wounds caused it to go still. Darian lay motionless, blood pouring from the devastating neck and shoulder wounds. The lion's bite had severed his carotid artery. He lost consciousness almost immediately, and despite Nicholas applying pressure while calling for emergency evacuation, Darian died within a minute. The blood loss was simply too massive and too rapid to survive. A chartered evacuation helicopter arrived within 40 minutes, but could only transport Darian's body and the lion back to camp. The investigation ruled it a hunting accident with no criminal charges. The Professional Hunting Association implemented stricter guidelines for bow hunting dangerous game, though the practice remained legal. Nicholas retired from professional hunting 6 months later. While the Kalahari had witnessed the deadly price of tracking wounded predators, The forests of Southeast Asia would demonstrate that even large herbivores could become unstoppable forces when driven by pain and aggression. It was March 26, 2017, when the dry season had begun to parch the teak forests of central Myanmar. For the farming village of Kyokpadaung, the crop-raiding elephant problem had reached a crisis point. Over 3 months, a solitary bull elephant had destroyed nearly 40% of the community's rice crop, threatening food security for the entire region. Village elders had petitioned wildlife officials multiple times, but bureaucratic delays prevented intervention. Families were growing desperate. Thant Za was a 42-year-old farmer who had lost his entire season's crop to the elephant's raids. His desperation led him to accept an offer from the village cooperative to eliminate the animal using a borrowed rifle, despite having no experience with dangerous game. The village pooled money for ammunition and agreed to support Thant's family regardless of the outcome. They had been tracking the elephant for 3 days, following the destruction path through the forest bordering agricultural areas. Fresh tracks that morning indicated the bull was less than a mile ahead, likely resting in dense teak forest, where visibility was limited to barely 30 feet. Asian elephants can weigh between 6,000 and 11,000 pounds, with adult bulls being significantly larger. While generally less aggressive than African elephants, Asian elephants are responsible for over 500 human deaths annually, primarily through crop-raiding conflicts. Bull elephants experience must, a period of elevated testosterone that increases aggression dramatically. During must, temporal glands secrete fluid, and temperament becomes extremely volatile. A charging elephant can reach 25 miles per hour, and the impact of several tons at that velocity is invariably fatal. The 2 men located fresh dung indicating the elephant had passed through less than an hour earlier. The forest was eerily quiet, birds and monkeys having fled ahead of the massive animal. Thant carried the rifle while Kaya served as spotter. They communicated only in whispers, acutely aware that the animal could be anywhere around them. They moved another quarter mile when Kaya spotted the elephant through a gap in the trees. The bull was feeding on bamboo shoots, partially obscured by vegetation. Dark streaks of temporal gland secretion marked both sides of his head, clear evidence of must and peak aggression. Kaya gestured for Thant to stop, and both men crouched low, barely breathing. Thant raised the rifle, attempting to find a clear shot through dense foliage. Elephant anatomy requires precise shot placement, as vital organs are protected by massive bone and muscle. A shoulder shot targeting the heart and lungs offers the best chance, but the angle must be nearly perfect. Thant's shot was rushed and poorly aimed. The bullet struck the upper shoulder area but deflected off the massive shoulder blade, rather than penetrating to vital organs. The impact triggered an immediate response from the already volatile must bull. The elephant trumpeted in rage, immediately identifying the direction of the threat. The massive animal charged without hesitation, crashing through bamboo and teak saplings with terrifying momentum. The distance was barely 70 feet, giving Thant no time to chamber another round. Both men turned to flee, but running from a charging elephant in dense forest was futile. The elephant smashed through vegetation that would have stopped humans. Kaya managed to dive behind a massive teak trunk, the tree's girth providing momentary protection. Thant was not as fortunate. The elephant caught him after barely 40 feet, its speed and momentum making escape impossible. The bull's trunk lashed out, striking Thant across the back and sending him sprawling face first into the forest floor. Before Thant could rise, the elephant's front foot came down on his upper back and head with the full weight of nearly 5 tons. The crushing impact was catastrophic and instant, causing injuries incompatible with survival. Death was immediate. The elephant stepped forward, bringing its second front foot down on Thant's lower body. The animal then wheeled around, searching for additional threats, before spotting Kaya behind the tree. The bull circled the massive teak, trumpeting and investigating, but did not press the attack. After nearly a minute, the elephant turned and crashed away through the forest. Kaya remained hidden for over an hour before cautiously approaching. The trampling had left remains barely recognizable as human. His report brought villagers and wildlife officials to the scene later that day. Wildlife authorities assembled a tracking team to locate and destroy the bull elephant, but the animal had already moved deep into the surrounding forest. Trackers followed its trail for 3 days before losing the signs entirely in increasingly remote terrain. With limited resources, authorities were forced to abandon the effort. The elephant was never found. Village authorities implemented improved crop protection measures, including electric fencing to prevent future conflicts. While Myanmar's forests had shown the unstoppable force of a charging elephant, the mangrove swamps of Bangladesh would deliver the most chilling encounter of all, a predator that turned the tables on 2 men who came to hunt it. It was April 19th, 2014, when the morning tide began flooding the narrow channels of the Sundarbans mangrove forest along the Bangladesh coast. The rising pre-monsoon tides had swollen the waterways, creating a maze of muddy channels and tangled root systems that stretched for miles. The air was thick with humidity, and the only sounds were the distant calls of kingfishers and the soft lapping of water against exposed roots. For Kadir Hossein, a 34-year-old former honey collector from the village of Satkira, these treacherous swamps represented opportunity rather than danger. Kadir had worked as a legitimate honey collector for nearly a decade before declining bee populations made the trade unsustainable. The transition to tiger poaching had been gradual but inevitable. A single tiger skin could fetch up to $15,000 through the right connections in Dhaka, enough to support his extended family for 2 years. He had completed 3 successful expeditions over the previous 18 months, each time returning undetected with his illegal cargo. The money had transformed his family's circumstances, and stepping away from the trade felt impossible. His partner, Rashid Mullah, was a 29-year-old fisherman whose knowledge of the tidal patterns made him invaluable for navigating the dangerous channels. The two men had departed before dawn, paddling a narrow wooden boat deep into restricted territory where ranger patrols were infrequent. Their target was a known tiger trail near a freshwater stream approximately 6 miles from the nearest ranger station. The journey had taken them through increasingly narrow waterways where the mangrove canopy closed overhead and filtered the light into dim green shadows. The plan was straightforward. They would position themselves along the trail during high tide when tigers often moved between hunting territories, wait for an opportunity, take the shot, and retreat before anyone discovered the kill. Kadir carried a modified rifle wrapped in waterproof cloth, while Rashid handled navigation and served as lookout. Bengal tigers are apex predators uniquely adapted to the Sundarbans mangrove environment. Adult males in the Sundarbans typically weigh between 300 and 400 pounds, smaller than mainland tigers due to the harsh mangrove habitat, and can measure over 9 feet in length. Unlike tigers in other regions, Sundarbans tigers hunt humans with surprising frequency, responsible for multiple fatal attacks each year across the delta. These tigers use water as cover, approaching prey silently through shallow channels where their striped coats blend with the shadows of mangrove roots. Their extremely powerful jaws are capable of crushing bone, typically targeting the throat to suffocate prey, or crushing the neck to cause rapid death. The two men had been waiting motionless for over 3 hours, the heat and mosquitoes testing their patience, when Rashid spotted fresh pug marks in the mud along the stream bank, roughly 40 feet away. The tracks indicated a large male, likely the same animal they had observed signs of during previous reconnaissance. Kadir carefully unwrapped his rifle, checking that the action remained dry as he positioned himself for a clear shot across the narrow channel. His hands were steady from experience, but his pulse quickened at the sight of the tracks. The animal was close. What neither man realized was that the tiger had already detected their presence. The animal had been moving parallel to their position through shallow water on the opposite bank, using the dense mangrove cover to mask its approach. The tiger moved nearly silent through the shallows, each massive paw placed deliberately to create minimal disturbance in the water. Occasionally, the animal paused, motionless, its eyes locked on the two figures in the boat, before advancing again through the tangled roots. Kadir was focused entirely on the stream bank ahead when the attack came from his right side. The tiger exploded from the shallow water barely 10 feet away, covering the distance in 2 enormous bounds. Kadir had no time to turn his rifle before the full weight of a large male tiger slammed into him. The impact knocked Kadir backward into the shallow water near the boat's edge. The tiger's jaws clamped around his throat and right shoulder, the crushing pressure fracturing his collarbone instantly. Kadir's rifle discharged once as it flew from his hands, the bullet striking harmlessly into the canopy. His scream was cut short as the tiger's bite closed off his airway. Rashid scrambled to the opposite end of the boat, unable to reach the rifle now floating several feet away. The boat rocked violently as the tiger maintained its grip, pulling Kadir deeper into the tidal channel. The animal's massive weight dragged them both into water approximately 4 feet deep, where the muddy bottom and tangled roots made escape impossible. The tiger maintained the suffocating throat hold as it dragged Kadir through the shallow water, keeping him pinned beneath the surface. Kadir's struggles weakened over the next several seconds as the combination of the crushing bite and submersion took effect. His movements ceased as drowning and suffocation ended his life. The tiger held on for several more seconds before releasing the body, which settled partially submerged among the tangled mangrove roots nearby. The tiger turned briefly toward Rashid, who remained frozen at the far end of the boat, barely breathing, before disappearing back into the mangrove forest as silently as it had appeared. The entire attack had lasted less than 45 seconds. Rashid remained motionless for nearly 10 minutes before carefully retrieving the oars and paddling frantically toward open water, abandoning both the rifle and his partner's body to the swamp. Authorities recovered partial remains 2 days later after Rashid's anonymous report led investigators to the approximate location. Recovery was difficult in the tidal mangrove system, where currents, crocodiles, and scavengers had disturbed the scene considerably. The investigation revealed the poaching operation through equipment recovered nearby. Rashid was never formally charged, as he had fled across the border into India immediately after the incident. The tiger was never located. Despite increased ranger patrols, the vast mangrove system, spanning thousands of square miles of near-identical tidal channels, made tracking any individual animal effectively impossible. Tiger attacks on people working illegally in the forest were periodically reported throughout the region. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.